Secondly, sometimes God's resources cannot be seen with the physical eye. Sometimes God's resources cannot be seen with the physical eye. The idea is that when Elijah's servant stepped outside and he looked and he saw, what he saw was the great Assyrian army. And he said to Elijah, he said, Master, he said, what are we going to do? We are afraid. I am afraid. What are we going to do? The Assyrian army is now upon us. What are we going to do? And Elijah simply was a man of prayer. And Elijah prayed and he asked God, he said, Lord, open the eyes of my servant that he may see. I pray, open the eyes of my servant that he may see. We are talking about the idea is that sometimes God's resources cannot be seen with the physical eye. Open the eyes of my servant that he may see. Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around. It is amazing. In Psalm 119 and verse 18, the psalmist prays to God and he's asking God, open thou mine eyes that I may behold wondrous things out of thy law. So the psalmist is asking God to open his eyes. The idea is not my neighbor's eyes, it's not my mother's eyes, not my father's eyes, not my children's eyes. The idea is a personal pronoun. Sometimes we have to ask God simply to open thou mine eyes. Not my father's eyes, Lord, but mine eyes. Because when our eyes are open, then we can see clearly. Jesus said, first of all, what we need to do is to take the beam out of our own eyes. Then we can see clearly how to be able to help, those who are in need. So the idea then is to ask God to open your eyes. Open thou mine eyes, that I may see. One hymn writer puts it this way, open mine eyes that I may see glimpses of truth which thou hast for me. Open mine eyes. So that's a prayer that we should all pray. Ask God daily to open our eyes, because sometimes we said that God's resources, special resources, cannot be seen with the physical eye. Sometimes God's resources cannot be seen because God is a spirit. And they that worship him, what he wants from us is worship. And they that worship him, the Bible says, must worship him in spirit and in truth. And the idea is that God cares about you. He knows what you're going through. He understands what you are going through. And because he understands what you're going through, he wants you to trust him. He wants me to trust him. And because he wants us to trust him, sometimes he allows us to find ourselves in circumstances where the way is blocked before us. And when there are mountains of obstacles on either side and it seems that we are hemmed in, the idea is at the point of man's extremity, when we are hemmed in, then there and there alone is God able to reveal his opportunity. At the point of man's extremity, when Moses came to the Red Sea and he was unable to go because the way was blocked before him, he said, when the children of Israel started to complain, he replied, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Just stay right here and see what God is able to do. And Moses called on the Lord, And God said to him, using the special resource that he had, all he had was a rod in his hand. And God said, stretch the rod over the sea. And Moses stretched the rod over the sea, and with that, the Bible tells us that the children of Israel were able to go over on dry land. Sometimes God's resources cannot be seen with the physical eye. And then thirdly, prayer is the key to God's resources. Thirdly, prayer is the key to God's resources. Now, we discovered that when the young man stepped outside and he saw the great Assyrian army, he realized that there was nothing that he could do. And so he cried out to his master, to Elijah, and he said, Master, he said, what shall we do? I am afraid, what shall we do? And his master responded by saying, by turning to God. And it says that Elijah prayed and asked God to open the eyes. Again, we see this. And Elijah prayed. We're talking about the idea that prayer is the key to God's resources. And so here we see, and Elijah, and it says, and Elijah prayed and said, Lord, I pray, open the eyes, open his eyes that he may see. Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around. So the idea is that prayer is the key to God's resources. So then, as we continue in the story, the idea is, then we said, then what happened, you may say, what happened to the Assyrian army? Okay, now the young man's eyes are open, and he saw the great army of God, how God sent his angels, and how they were there to protect him. But what really happened? What happened, and how the rest of the story went on? The Bible tells us, as we read on, it says, when the Syrians came down to him, Elijah prayed to the Lord and said, strike this people, I pray thee, with blindness. So here is Elijah praying to God again. Now he's praying to God, and he asked God to strike the Assyrians with blindness. And he struck them with blindness according to the word of the Lord. So the Lord struck the Syrian forces with blindness. And the amazing thing was that with that, Elijah was able to take the entire army, march them, all these blind men, he was able to march them simply into Samaria. And with that, there they were. And the strange thing about the story, you said, and what did the Israelites do to the Syrians? God told the Syrian king, he told Elijah, he said, well, now what I would like for you to do is to provide food for them. Now, this is an amazing story. Now, you have just captured these individuals who have been trying to fight against you. And you've now captured them. And now that you've captured them, God said, no, don't kill them. Don't kill not one of them. What I would like for you to do is to take them and feed them. So here they fed all these blind men. I believe, the story does not say this, but I believe that later maybe the Lord restored their sight. But the king of Israel wanted to kill them. And so in verse 23 of 2 Kings chapter 6. It goes like this. It says, don't kill them. Would you kill those whom you have not taken captive? So the man of God, the prophet Elijah, said to the king of Israel, don't you kill them, because you did not capture them. God captured them, so don't you try to kill them. And so here we see that victory belongs to the Lord. And then also we see that God is a God of mercy. Although the king of Israel would have wanted to kill these individuals, yet that's not what God's plan was. God's plan was simply feed them. And so they fed them. And by feeding them, He set food before them. God did not just perform this just for the young man, He performed this great miracle, not just for Elijah's servant, but He performed this miracle for the children of Israel, for the Israelites, and He also performed this miracle for the Syrian, so that they could know that God is God. My friends, are you at a crossroad in your life? Do you feel that you are at a place where you need to trust God? I think that this story encapsulates the idea that we all need greater faith in order to trust God when we find ourselves hemmed in. It's almost like the story of Daniel. When he was thrown into the lion's den, Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. But while he was there, God had special resources for him, because God sent His angel and closed the mouth of the lion. When they took the Hebrew boys and threw them into the fiery furnace, the Bible said that God sent His angel and He protected them. And on one occasion, the Bible tells us that even the individuals who threw the men into the fire were consumed by the heat of the fire, because they heat the fire 7 times hotter than it was. It's amazing, the reality of the fact that God knows and He cares about us. So just in closing, I just want to wrap up what we have said. The idea is that we've said that God's resources are far greater than the enemy. Think about it. God's resources are far greater than the enemy. Secondly, sometimes God's resources cannot be seen with the physical eye. We need spiritual insight to be able to see that. And then thirdly, prayer is the key to God's resources. Prayer is the key to God's resources. So, I hope that this message has been something to be able to lift you out of your circumstances. It is my prayer that these messages have been messages of hope and inspiration. I would like to make an appeal to you. If you're going through difficult times, here's a number on your screen that you can call. The number is area code 410-269-0419. 410-269-0419. And I'll be more than happy to provide spiritual help or counsel to you. So just in closing, I just want to say thank you very much for tuning into this telecast. Lord's willing, I will be back next week with another message of hope and inspiration. And in the meanwhile, may God's richest blessings be yours. Thank you.